Time to answer them. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today. I am going to record this session, so if anybody wants a link to the recording afterwards, you can share it with folks in your organization. Or I plan to be riveting, so you might just want to watch it a few times. My name is Jeff Means. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Colburn Hill Group, and I want to take a little bit of time to talk about analytics and automation in the framework of intelligent automation. My goal today is to arm you with a bunch of information about how to get into the world of automation, how to go from where you are today to a much higher level of automation. Just a little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm one of the founders of Colburn Hill Group. I play the CEO role, which means I do a little bit of everything. I came here from a revenue cycle background. I've been in the space for about 18 years. I've done the operational roles like Director of Patient Accounts, Director of Patient Access. I've been a VP of Rev Cycle. So I'm coming from a position of understanding revenue cycle management, understanding what it's like to manage teams and to try to get claims paid. I've also had additional duties over the last years as a product owner. And so I've taken about 8 products to market. And so I have a passion for introducing technologies. Well, it's pretty fun to do that. If you, on my resume here, if you go all the way back in my life, I was a logistician for the Army, kind of pre-War on Terror, and then the first few years of the War on Terror. So my perspective is, number one, logistical challenges. Number two, I'm a technologist. And number three, I've been around the world of revenue cycle management. So bringing together the people, the process, the technology in a way that helps move forward the performance of revenue cycle management. A little bit about Colburn Hill Group. We've been in business for about 8 years. Last year, we became part of the Tegria family. And so we've been on a path of developing products and solutions. And with joining Tegria, we've got a lot more access to resources and have really big plans for growth in the future. I like to think of Colburn Hill as providing one product, but we deliver it in 3 different ways. We do have a management consulting team where we teach people how to fish. We've got, today I'll talk mostly about our technology solutions. I think of that as kind of the fishing pole that we rent to people to use. And then we also do have an outsourcing arm where if you just wanted us to use the fishing pole to catch the fish for you, we do a little bit of that. But I really think of it as one product, and that is revenue cycle automation. And our mission in doing this is really more focused on improving net revenues as opposed to reducing cost. And typically we can squeeze 1 or 2% improvement out of the net revenue, which is super meaningful. And again, it's really about exceptional performance of the revenue cycle. Okay, today's webinar is about intelligent automation and what is intelligent automation. That's really using technologies that have emerged over the last 5 or 7 years in a smart way to drive a digital transformation. And I want to propose a framework and an analogy to get started. First the analogy. If you want to renovate your bathroom, you're not going to just use a hammer. You're going to use an entire toolkit. You're going to use a hammer and a saw and a measuring stick. You're going to draw up plans, and then you're going to follow plans to have that new bathroom. But like I said, you're not going to just use a hammer. And robotic process automation is one of these emerging technologies that has gotten a lot of traction in the last 5 years. That's really just the hammer. You really want the entire toolkit to do it. So let me propose this framework as a way of using the toolkit together in an integrated way. The framework is measure, predict, intervene. It starts with using analytics, using traditional measures to assess where you are and spot the opportunities to make some changes. From those measurements, you create a baseline and you create knowledge about historical performance. Let's go to the next step. You can use that historical performance, layer that on top of the current state of the business to make predictions about what's going to happen. One of the tools in the toolkit is obviously predictive analytics, and that's basically just taking your past performance and using it against your current book of business to make predictions about what you think is going to happen. Most organizations, unfortunately, stop after making predictions. And from those predictions, they may gain all sorts of insights about things that are bad that are going to happen or things that are good that are going to happen, and all sorts of insights into maybe why those things are happening and all the things that we could do to drive better performance. And like I said, the bad news is most organizations stop there. You need to go one step further. You need to use those predictions to change what you're doing. You need to have some sort of intervention to change the predicted outcomes. If you're predicting that something bad is going to happen, you should do something to stop it. And so this is really where that RPA comes into place, where the workflow optimization comes into place, where some of these other interventions come. And again, I really want to stress that you need to go all the way to that last mile of interventions. Otherwise, you're a whole lot smarter, but the organization's no better off and the outcomes are no better. So let me fill in a little bit with more about what I think is the hammer and the saw and the measuring stick. Colburn Hill Group provides a suite of products to do this well. We're going to talk a lot today about hints and robotic process automation. We'll talk a little bit about workflow optimization. We'll talk a little bit about AI and machine learning. Another day, we'll probably talk about process mining. I've done a couple of webinars this month about process mining and task mining. If you want links to those recordings, just direct message me. I'll get those to you. If there's enough interest, we'll do some more rounds of that. But this is what I think the toolkit looks like. There's an analytics layer to do the measurement. There's some artificial intelligence in process mining and task mining that help you to measure where you are. Those feed into predicting what you think the future outcomes are going to be. Predictive models about return on investment, predictive forecasts about cash results, denials results, expected propensity to deny, expected propensity to recover, those types of things. From there, you start getting into the opportunity to have interventions. Where should you interface to APIs that are out there that can do work for you? Where should you change the workflow that's in place? Maybe you should add things to work queues, take things away from work queues, assign work queues to different people, maybe reprioritize the work queue in a better way. So there's a lot to talk about with workflow optimization. Like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more on another webinar. And then finally, that emerging set of interventions is around robotic process automation. Again, in my analogy, this is the hammer. And so a lot of this is leading up to identifying the nails that are out there, organizing and lining up the nails so that robotic process can maximize what gets hit by the hammer. Again, we'll talk a little bit about those machine learning and predictive models. We'll talk a little bit about workflow optimization, and we'll spend the meat of today on our HINTS program that is proprietary to Colburn Hill Group and connecting that to robotic process automation to get the best return on investment for those efforts. This is the framework. Let's go a little bit deeper dive on exactly what is HINTS, because this is our proprietary system, and it's kind of Colburn Hill Group's secret sauce to getting more out of your robotic process automation. So first, let me kind of define what is a hint. What is the HINTS program itself? I would describe this, I'd put it in the category of decision support. It is an analytics tool that gives you wildly more visibility into the health of your accounts receivables. In my analogy, it is the system that identifies the nails and organizes the nails. I guess in essence, a hint is what's wrong with each account that's in my receivables? Why is it in the receivables today? And what needs to happen next to resolve whatever that issue is? And Therefore, it's a classification system. It's a defect classification system. It gives you visibility into how many of each defect. It gives you insights into why those defects are happening. Are they growing? Are they shrinking? All of those things that come with a decision support system. And then, of course, it is a workflow enabler because you get all of those scores about what's going on in the receivables in a way that seamlessly connects to either workflow provided by Colburn Hill Group or workflows in your native systems like Cerner or Epic or some other third party. Really, the crux of it again is what's wrong with each account and what needs to happen next to resolve whatever's wrong with it. I have a few points there about there's some other attributes you can take it a little bit further. This is some of the stuff I'd like to hold for some of that predictive modeling discussion, but from these, you can make predictions about what skill set is specifically needed in the organization to deal with the types of defects that you have. It allows you to take those skills required and connect high-skilled work to high-skilled labor, low-skilled work to low-skilled labor. Again, from a decision support standpoint, do I need more high-skilled labor? Do I need more in particular niches within denials? Do I need more clerical staff? Do I need more billing staff, et cetera? Some of the other attributes that you get are what's the predicted return on investment for working these accounts? You can predict the labor cost that will go into working the defects, and you can predict the cash outcomes that you'll get from doing it. It allows you a chance to optimize the staffing, optimize the allocation, optimize the prioritization that comes from that. So that is the core of hints. Again, what's wrong with each account and what do we need to do next to solve that problem? How do we do that? Well, it's proprietary and there's a lot that goes into doing this. I would summarize it by saying Colburn Hill Group has developed a bunch of proprietary algorithms. Those algorithms, every night we calculate 400 individual attributes about each account. Some of these are really sophisticated, some of them are pretty basic, but we calculate about 400 attributes for every account every night. And then we've accumulated a set of business rules that takes those attributes and builds a profile to say, this is what problem number one looks like. Here's all the accounts that have problem one, and here's what you need to do to solve problem number one. Let me summarize it this way. It is a traditional software application. We use advanced analytic techniques to manage the business rules, to have a bunch of strategies around creating new business rules when we have a new situation. We use advanced analytics to monitor when things are changing, to measure if the rules are working right. But at the heart, the HINTS program itself it's complex algorithms, but they are traditional algorithms. We can always explain why accounts are getting scored the way that they're getting scored. Now, what do you do when you have a hint? This is kind of that connection to the interventions, the connection to the workflows. Well, the first thing that you should do after you've crunched your hints is you should take those next actions that need to happen to solve the problems. Any of those next required actions that could be done with a robot or with some other automation, you should connect those to the automation. So we build packages of robots to go do those next required actions. We use the hints to tell us which robots we should be building, because which ones we will generate the best return. And then we line up those nails and we connect them to the robot. So the first thing is really just about eliminating work from the staff, and it's connecting those next required actions that are low in complexity and high in volume to automations. We call this resolve because we're resolving the receivables in a fully automated way. And then whatever you can't connect to your automations, then you should give them to your staff in a really smart way. You should use those attributes that I was describing to get the right account to the right person at the right time. You should use those attributes to sequence the workflow logically. You should use those data elements to right size the staff, to have the right amount of high skilled labor and low skilled labor, to segment the denials in a way that makes a lot of sense, and to prioritize those claims. We call this process priority. because it's really about getting the right account to the right person at the right time. If you integrate these things in a logical way, I made a claim earlier about you get a wildly different type of visibility into what's going on with your accounts receivables. Number one, you have the ability to see size and shape in a way that you didn't before. That gives you a bunch of tools for doing root cause analysis, for going upstream and doing optimization of the process upstream so you don't get so many of these denials and other defect issues. It gives you the chance to work 100% of your balances because we're connecting to robots to eliminate a lot of the work altogether and give you the visibility into what the right time, the right person at the right time with the right information. The bottom line is you should get a massive productivity enhancement. If you automate half of the work, well, you're going to get a double productivity level just by adding those robots. And then if you give the work to the staff in a smarter sequence, in a better segmentation, you can double your productivity again. You have the opportunity to do a massive, up to 4 times the increase in your productivity with the staff that you have. Some of this is complicated. Let me just give you one example. How do we pull this off? I want to use this example like I used to do when I was a director of patient accounts. I would take a bunch of data. On the left side, we talk data from the ATB, data from transactions on the accounts, claims and remittances, the normal types of data that you have. And from that data, I want to write a business rule for some issue that the staff are saying that they're having. And so I can use some logic, and I can use some logic, some algorithms to calculate a bunch of attributes, and then I can write a business rule to do that. The actionable outcome that I can get from this is classification of the defect. How many of these do I have, and what do I need to do to solve it? So here's one example. If we use AR data, transactional data about payments and adjustments that have already been posted, sequence of claims and remittances, I can have an example like this. Here's one hint example. You should adjust this $73 balance because you had a primary payment and you had a secondary payment. That secondary payment posted a secondary contractual as well that should not have been posted, and that threw this credit balance of $73. What you should do, the next required action is you should reverse that $73 contractual. And here's a classification. This is in the family of credit balances. The specific hint is that the credit balance is equal to something caused by the secondary payment. This is the easiest skill level to resolve. And I'm just going to classify this. This is our business rule CB for credit balance 97. It's this 97th business rule we created around this. You can take the time to go identify these. Hopefully every organization is already doing things like this. And you can accumulate over time lots of examples like this. When I say that Colburn Hill Group has accumulated 7,000 business rules, that's what I mean. We've done this work 7,000 times. We have 7,000 examples, just like that credit balance example. And then, like I said, because this is built on a modern technology stack, we can use artificial intelligence to identify additional profiles that we should build, additional business rules we should build into the system. We can use artificial intelligence to measure if those rules are working properly, to monitor if things are changing, if things are spiking in an upward direction or on a negative direction. And then, like I said, we've built algorithms to calculate over 400 attributes every night on every single account in the receivables to do this kind of thing. So again, this is using analytics at scale. It starts with how do you classify one defect in a systematic way, but then you repeat it thousands of times and you add all sorts of strategies to manage the portfolio of business rules. That is hints in a nutshell. Jeff, you haven't talked all that much about automation. I thought this webinar was about automation. We connect the results of that hints analysis to automation. Our list of typical use cases, this isn't very different than any other webinars, any of the other vendors providing robotic process automation. Essentially, robotic process automation is mimicking the keystrokes and mouse clicks that a human would do to perform a task. And the best use cases are the use cases that are relatively simple and relatively high in volume. And so these examples here, you can take a screenshot if you haven't done one now. Otherwise, direct message me and I'll give you this list. And again, we can publish a link to the webinar if you want to go back. But this list of use cases, it's really not very different than the typical use cases being done by any other organization. Hopefully, what I articulated in this description of the way Hints works gives you a little bit of an insight into how to find all of the nails that are out there, how to line up all of those nails so that when you have the robotic process automation hammer, you can maximize the use of that hammer to push way more volume through the use of that hammer. Let's do a little bit of live demonstration on what it looks like to use the Hints in action. Give me a moment here just to toggle over to our system. I'm just going to hit a quick refresh, make sure my sign-in didn't time out here. Obviously, this is going to be a PHI-proof, anonymized demonstration here, but this is what it looks like to use our production system as a manager. We have two different ways of transmitting the Hints information. This demonstration is primarily going to be from a manager's perspective. I'm going to do a business intelligence demonstration of it. There's obviously also the type of view from the user itself, the individual accounts receivable specialist who's going to be consuming this on a daily basis. That view is a little bit different. I'll give you a little bit of insights into how to do that. To the degree that there's interest, we can do another webinar about what it looks like from that user's perspective to go consume these Hints. So, okay, let me orient you a little bit to the screen. I gave you kind of that example of that one credit balance example of what it's like to craft a business rule, what it's like to go through the process of making one defect detection and connecting it to the other attributes. This is what it looks like to do it at scale and to look at the broader strategy of managing the business rules. So I'm just going to start with this is basically a decomposition tree on the top half, the green bars that you're seeing. And so at the highest level, we've cataloged 16 different families of defects. So you've got the broad categories like the receivables that are out in self-pay, whether it's after insurance or purely uninsured. You've got billing defects where you're in the billing cycle or you're on claim edits. You've got claims that are in the adjudication cycle. And then you can see the relative size and counts of the volume of accounts get smaller as we go down here. You have a portion, the broadest category is going to be your denials. You have maybe some of the robots or some of the other automations through APIs are doing claim status checks to see why something is where it is in the adjudication cycle. Some of the less volume areas are patient responsibility amounts that are hung up in the insurance balance, maybe accounts that have been already worked by somebody on the staff and still have some sort of defect, a secondary billing. So you get the sense here that we have these broad categories. So is Hints a denials management tool? Yes, but it's broader than just a denials management tool. You get, like I said, these 16 families of categories. And one thing that's a bit painful about AR management, if you've been in the space for a while, is that sometimes you get multiple defects at the same time. And so we have categories to deal with when there are those multiple categories of defects. So let's just take this down, peel a couple layers of the onion. I mentioned denials is one of our broadest categories. When I click to focus on denials, which you'll see here, the next column over, filtered down, there's 110 different hint categories within the space of denials for this particular organization. You see the typical suspects, the typical things that you top of mind, like coordination of benefits denials. We know that a zero payment was posted, but we don't have a remittance to tell us what type of a denial it is. So you have to go to the correspondence maybe to see what kind of denial is out there. There's lots of flavors of denials: no authorizations, non-covered, coordination of benefits, etc. There's 110 categories here. And so what you'll find is that one of the strategies that we've taken is, when we can be specific, we will be as specific as possible. And where we can't be specific, we won't. So that I just passed up a lacks information category. That's the type of denial where the payer is giving you the generic CARC code 16 for lacking information, but they aren't giving a remarks code to tell you the more specific reasons. I scroll down a little bit more here, and I'm just going to drill into this one called lacks information medical records request. Here's where we can be more specific, and this is where we do have this generic CARC code that says lacks information, but we also have a remarks code that says the specific, we want a medical record to justify the use of this treatment. And so from here, you can see that there's about 500 of these in the receivables. At this level of specificity, we can be much more prescriptive about what the next required action is to solve that. And in the cases of where you're trying to get to full automation, you can see where this level of specificity allows you to connect the robots to do it. There are more layers underneath it. There's actually, in this case, when I drill down on the medical record denials, there are 29 of those individual hint profiles, those individual business rules for why those are. And this is down to that CARC, RARC. Sometimes it's a combination of a payer information. Sometimes it's a combination of getting information from some other location, like a claim status check, or even scraping text off of a paper EOB someplace. But from here, you get the sense of you can peel lots of layers of the information. Again, this decomposition tree, this peeling the layers of the onion, is to give you a sense of what it's like to enact a strategy of managing business rules at scale and using them in a way that helps operators make decisions about how to manage the receivables in a very different way. Let me briefly switch gears from that manager's perspective to the individual user's perspective. How do you get this in the hands of an individual user to do something different? Let me just draw your attention to let me make it full screen here, but the grid at the bottom, this is the drill down to those, I think it was 495 accounts. It's like $13 million of receivables that we're talking about. That's the 500-ish accounts that have this particular denial. And here's some of those attributes that give you the insights. The next required action to solve this problem is you've got to go get that medical record and you've got to submit it to the payer. And then if you're the individual person working these, you'll get this text description under the column hint that gives you in detail, here's exactly what's going on. You have this denial with this CARC RARC from this payer on this date. If it's one particular CPT code, will say, and those instructions of the next thing that needs to happen here is you've got to organize the medical records and submit the medical record from there. So this is what it's like from the user's perspective. This view here, where I've taken one particular business rule and drilled down on it, this is one of the ways that you can optimize the use of your staff. If you actually sequenced a list of accounts with the same defect, like accounts in sequence, then this is one way that you can use the same head count, the same number of staff, to achieve much more, because they're not constantly switching gears from this medical records request to this coordination of benefits denial to this phone call to a physician's office to secure an authorization, but you're sticking with one specific type of defect. So there's lots of things that you can do to optimize the work queues and management of the list. Hopefully this drill to the detail here gives you the sense of all the different types of workflow optimizations you can do to do it. So here's one intervention that we can do. We can give the staff a different type of work queue. We can sequence it different. We can take things off of a work queue and add other things on a work queue. And we can create a series of work queues that are optimized for the staffing so that you segment the accounts to the right person with the right skills to do it. Let me do one other deep dive on a hints example as a way of just giving you one more example, but a different type of intervention here. Let me just pick on medical necessity denials, for example. When I drill in on this category, we've got, looks like 19 individual business rules associated with this. And I'm just gonna pick this one. The business rule ID on this is going to be the DENPR. The abbreviation there is about there's a denial and there's a patient responsibility, and this is Rule 2081. Here you can drill down in, and what you see is there's only one CPT code in play. In other instances, like if I pick on this denial 1081, you can see that there are a couple of specific CPT codes that have higher volumes than others. So that other type of intervention that you can do is you can do some of the root cause analysis as to which specific service areas or which specific CPT codes are out there to that these things could be prevented. One intervention type is to go upstream, optimize the process to prevent some of these things from happening. I like that example I started on. Let me just come back to it for a moment. It's a denial. I wanted to illustrate that in a complex set of algorithms and business rules, you can do some of these specific things, like when there is a denial and a patient responsibility, both on the same remittance, and those two issues together make up your reason for the balance being on the account. So the hint that an individual user would get would be, there's both this medical necessity denial for X dollars, and there's some copay coinsurance because this is a Medicare outpatient claim. And so there's actually two defects, two actions that need to come out of here. Is you need to evaluate if you can appeal or rebill that medical necessity portion, and then you need to make sure that you get that coinsurance copay down to the right place. Okay, last thing before I leave this page, I want to connect to some of those predictive models that I mentioned. On the right side, I have a couple of these donut charts here. And this gives you just a little bit of a sense of some of those other attributes associated with the individual hints. So we've talked about the next required action, those next required actions. This is the steps you need to take to resolve whatever that defect is. And you can see there's a Pareto distribution of what those next required actions are. If I hover on there, some you need to resolve some claim edits, some you need to get the payer to the claim to the right place, some you should go check the eligibility or a status, some you should be taking an adjustment in the patient accounting system, some you need to get the claim to the secondary insurance, et cetera. This is one insight into what is automatable with RPAs, and it also gives you some insight into right-sizing the staffing and skill level of what those are. Some of those more predictive models, one of the other models is a do for work algorithm, and this algorithm uses the claim status, the remittance status, the sequence of claims and secondary claims, the human interventions, and then some intelligence about history of how long each particular payer takes to adjudicate particular types of claims. And it allows you to segment in a different element, a different attribute, which ones need attention right now and which ones should we not work, because you can't do anything productive to solve those accounts today. Another interesting attribute is Deadwood status. The Deadwood algorithm, what this does is it evaluates the accounts for, is it even possible to recover revenue from these accounts? So it takes into consideration the timely filing and appeal limits for the particular payers, the primary and secondary. It considers what type of a denial. It considers if people have done actual appeals or actual follow-up work. to keep the filing limit alive. And so here's just a few examples of some of those other insights that you can layer in, into the analysis. I want to do two more briefly here, two more illustrations briefly. I talked a bit there about the next required action, the prescription for how do you solve each individual account. This bar chart on the top left of the other report here, this just gives you your distribution of what all of those are. And you can see in some of these details, it's pretty obvious certain ones that you should be building a robot to go do those automated actions for you. And then just like any of these other places, in interactive business intelligence, experience allows you to click on one category, drill down one level of detail that gives you all of the different types of hints that are proposing this refund. I just clicked on refund for as an example here. All the different cases that are doing it, and then the specific drill to individual accounts, so that you can go do your really deep root cause analysis. And this gives you a sense of how you can connect these to your workflows, so that you give people the right accounts at the right time to the right sequence. All right, let me give you one teaser about one of the other predictive models that we've done here. Like I said, we can do another webinar specifically focused on machine learning and predictive models. Let me just give you one that I think is easy for people to get their heads around. You've seen now some of the details of what we collect and log about predictive analytics, about the hints and about the receivables itself. We log all of these attributes over time, and what we can do is, once we've established this baseline, we can measure what is your traditional recovery rate for each individual hint category. And if we monitor the workflow itself, we can also attribute how much labor are you spending to work each of these categories. So we can basically establish a baseline of what does it cost to work these, and what is your success rate of turning that work into cash payments. From that, you can make a prediction about the labor cost and the return that you're going to get from individual accounts or from populations of accounts. And so what you can do from this is you can calculate what are individual accounts worth today and what is a population of those worth. So you can do two things. You can choose to stop working entire populations of accounts with a validated prediction of what is it worth doing it. The analogy here is something almost every healthcare organization I've worked with in the past 5 years has a propensity to pay model, and is doing some level of presumptive charity for their uninsured populations. That's doing the exact same things. What you're saying is with relatively good accuracy, we can predict these are patients that will not pay their balances because of a variety of circumstances. And because of that, we know it would cost more in labor to try to squeeze some of this than we would get in return. We know if we hounded every one of these patients and sent a whole bunch of statements and put them through collections, we know we would collect something. We just know it would cost more in expenses than what we would get in return. And so we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do presumptive charity. You can do the same analogous type of thing for your insurance AR. It's just way more complicated because there's so many more variables in play here. And so that's one example of taking a population of accounts to say, here's entire categories that we know have negative returns on investment for working those populations. We're going to stop doing that. We're going to take that labor force and apply it to someplace else where we can get a better bang for the buck. That's one predictive model in action. Like I said, there's a whole variety of things that we can talk about with predictive models and how to do that. That's the live demonstration of what it's like to use an advanced analytics system in your organization to drive a much better opportunity for interventions. What do you get what is it worth? What do you get in return for doing this? Well, here's one example at a multi-hospital medical center, multi-hospital chain in the Southwest. We've been in operation for a few years at this place, and we implemented hints immediately. We drove different types of prioritization, different types of segmentation of the workflow using that priority system. We used the business intelligence tools that I was just demonstrating to look at denials, to go prevent things upstream, to go, add more staff to certain things and reduce staff from the other things. Ultimately, we built 12 robots and implemented those, connected those to the hints process. I've got the use cases, in particular, the most valuable ones we did with this organization. Here's the results. We were able to double the productivity of the staff by automating half of the follow-up activity. At the same time, we were able to reduce the initial denials from the payers from some of that process engineering upstream. Because we were doing all of this automation and some of the reductions of denials, we actually reduced headcount in the back office. We used that as a way of offsetting the cost of implementing the systems. The side benefits, we were also able to reduce by 30% the amount of placements to vendors. That reduced vendor spend. It also reduced the receivables on the books. And side benefit, we were able to eliminate a whole bunch of the credit balances, freeing up a bunch of staff to do much more valuable things than issue refunds to payers or just take adjustments on the system to do it. So one just broad thing I would say, if you're pursuing automations in your organization, you should be able to see the results in your traditional revenue cycle metrics. What does follow-up productivity look like? What do your initial denials look like? What do your write-offs look like? What does your staff requirement look like? What are your placement to vendors? All those traditional revenue cycle KPIs that you're using to measure your organization. If you go through a transformation, you should see, of course, you want to measure the individual initiatives that you do, but you should also see it in your broader KPIs that roll up. How long does it take to drive results like that? It takes about a year. This is not something that there's no silver bullet. It doesn't happen overnight. There's lots of individual things that you can do really quickly, but it does take an investment of time and energy. And if you're going to change the way that your staff do their work in a really meaningful way, it means that managers need to manage their work differently, and staff need to perform their day-to-day functions differently. Those are things that just don't happen overnight. Our recommendation, the Colburn Hill typical timeline, it looks like, let's start with a measure phase. Let's get a bunch of data. Let's run the algorithms that we have. Let's optimize the algorithms for your organization. With that assessment, we do some road mapping and we say, here's what we recommend. You need 10 robots or you need 20 robots. And here's the amount of automation we can do if we implement those. Here's the volumes that we would run through each of those robots that we're recommending. And from that, you can make predictions about the return on investment you'll get. In other words, a roadmap that is data-based, that gives you the ability to make those decisions based on the return on investment you'll get from it. From there, we go into an implementation phase where we start turning on the technologies. When we implement our first RPAs, the typical experience is that work queues just get smaller. Work just disappears. The staff, they continue to do what they normally do. They may notice that I used to have 1,000 in my queue all the time, and now I have half of that or 2/3 that or 1/3 that. And so they may notice that their workload shrank, but their day-to-day stays largely the same. The experience from the managers, though, is wildly different because they used to manage, I give 1,000 to this team and 1,000 to that team, and those volumes decreased, and they start having those visibility into all of the attributes of what's going on in the receivables. We start adjusting what the different workflow segmentations are and start adjusting, hey, let's have more people do A and less people do B. You're starting to less staff doing certain tasks and more RPAs doing certain tasks. Those tend to lead to the more complex RPA optimizations, the more complex API integrations with maybe other systems, other types of automations that are available. And then ultimately you want to embed, things change over time. So ultimately you need to go into a maintenance mode where you do have the opportunity to do continuous business improvement. You have a new type of metrics, a new type of scorecard for what's going on in the organization. Okay, I'm a fast talker, a lot of material. Again, in that framework, it starts with measure where you are. From the measurement of where you are, you find all sorts of opportunities. It also creates a baseline of where you can predict what's going to happen in the future. When you're making these predictions, where you should do something different, you need to make an intervention. The best types of interventions are eliminate work altogether through the use of better workflow management, through the use of robotic process automation. And then if you can't fully automate in those types of senses, then you do things to optimize the workflow where it is. You resequence, you resegment, you align the skills required with the skills that you have on staff. You right size and right shift the skill level improvements. Again, you work through this cycle of measure where you are. From those measurements, you can predict what's going to happen. Any of the predictions that you don't like what the outcome is expected to be, you should do something different in your organization. This toolkit of all of the different available modern technologies is a way to go do that bathroom renovation in a wildly better way than just using a hammer and a nail. Again, we do other processes. If you're interested in the demonstration of what process mining looks like and what task mining looks like within the context of revenue cycle management, direct message me and I'll send you a link, or we could do another presentation. If you'd like to peel back more layers of the onion here and see specifically what this would look like in your organization, please direct message me and we can do it. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to do it that way, or my email address is on the screen. Thank you, everybody, for giving me some of your morning today. If you have feedback or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Stay tuned to the Colburn Hill Group LinkedIn feed or the Tegria LinkedIn feed for upcoming webinars. Thank you, everybody.